Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Integrative You Radio. You have Dr. Nick and Dr. Nicole here. So we are talking about a topic that was stimulated from a I want to say a heated conversation in the kitchen, but it wasn't necessarily heated between the two of us, but it was just heated as we were talking about the concept of what we're covering in this podcast. Because as as it unfolds, you're gonna understand the frustration. So, as many of you know, as avid listeners, Dr. Nick and I are doctors, and we spend a lot of time and a lot of money to become doctors. And when we got out of
I should just went on
school,
YouTube.
what'd you say? Should have just
I
went
should
on
have just went
YouTube.
on YouTube.
Hey, after people listen to this podcast, that might be what they do. So, don't get me wrong, we're very grateful for our journey, and we know that it was all part of the evolution of who we've become. But what we were, our initial experience is we got out of school, and part of why we do what we do now is because the textbook didn't tell us shit. The clients that were coming through our door didn't match the textbook, and so you go on this journey of what do I not know? And hence for us, it spiraled into learning so much more outside of the box concepts when it came to health and biochemistry and the physical body. And then it spiraled into the mental, the emotional, the energetic, etc. And now, we've become the weird and interesting doctors that we are today.
It was
We
funny as it was actually just yesterday that a newer client, he was like, you know, this is the way you explain everything through science, even though it's like the weird shit. He's like, now it's like this is normal, and all the normal people are fucking weirdos. And I was like, yep, you got it.
Well, I think the thing that we realized is that especially when it started, honestly, it's all of it. I was just going to say when it comes to the mental emotional, but we had to unlearn so much of what we learned in the more conventional educational setting. And I know that we're in this era right now that there are a lot of people that are homeschooling. They're putting their kids in unconventional school settings from, I want to say a co-op school. Am I saying that right? But there are these different specialty schools, there are free schools, Waldorf schools, Montessori schools, etc. And and then people that are just homeschooling as well. And part of it is people are doing this because they're finding that there are limitations in the traditional educational system. There's things that they straight up don't agree with. And they're also finding that kids are not developing properly. The average IQ of children of all different ages is not very high in the more conventional settings. So then we might say, okay, but there's private schools, and then, there's kids that go on to Ivy League schools at Harvard and Yale. And what Nick and I got heated talking about is that most of the time, these prestigious schools, it's about who you meet. It's about the networking opportunities. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these school systems, they're they're taking away creativity. They're taking away critical thinking. They're taking away innovative thinking patterns, which because we're entrepreneurs and we're always looking at businesses and the businesses that we classify as visionary companies versus companies that fail in a couple of years or companies that are just not as well known. And that's the thing. Like, if you ever went and studied Apple, That's everything they talk about. They talk about it being unique, outside of the box, innovative, like doing shit that everybody else thought was crazy and wild, and you can't do that, and that's too off the wall. People aren't going to want that. People aren't going to like that. And it's the companies that went against the grain and they did things very, very differently and they were extremely innovative are the visionary companies that have persevered past their original founder. They've persevered, 50 years, 100 years or longer. And so what we want to showcase here in this podcast is really what creates a level of personal and professional success? And is that through critical thinking, creativity, innovation? And how are we potentially being held back by the things that we're being programmed with through more conventional models?
I'm going to try to not get too deep with this conversation.
Oh gosh. Usually it's going to get weird if that's what you're prefacing with.
You're stating all this, and my brain always goes to why.
Hmm.
And the foundation, like, why do we go to school? Well, the thought process is, well, you go to school so you can live a better life, because people that aren't educated, they can only go so far in life,
Hmm.
and they're not able to live a good life versus somebody that's educated.
But that's
Okay,
the
fair.
program.
Yep.
The the
But
half
it's
truth.
but it's fair. But it's fair, because education can come in many different forms, as we're starting to see.
Yes.
We used to be all sheep, and now some people are leaving the farm and making their own decisions in life. But I mean, even with that, the homeschooling, like what you talked about, this morning I saw this post from a guy that he was being interviewed, and she's like, "This sounds weird, but were you homeschooled?" Because he was being interviewed and it had like nothing. He goes, "Yeah, of course I was." Um, and he goes, "I woke up whenever I woke up, it was typically around probably 8:30, and I had breakfast. I got everything I needed to get done in school in 2 hours." He goes, "And then I had the rest of the day." And he goes, "I was a bad kid. I stole tires, like I did things, like I pushed boundaries, and that all of that led me to now I think he has like 30 different businesses,
Hmm.
which isn't what I want to do. But it showed for him, it was like perfect. It allowed him to understand how much he could achieve in such a little amount of time. He goes, "I started college when I was 15."
Hmm.
And it goes, like, why wouldn't I? He's like, "I already knew everything." And he knew everything by roughly 2 hours a day.
Hmm.
And then you're like, well, why do they have school from 8 to 3, 8 to 4? And then you look at, oh, it's all just programming for the industrial age. Well, we're
Yes.
moving out of the industrial age. But then you look at, going deep, like, well, who was the industrial age created by? Who funded the schools? Do
Yeah.
your own
It's all
research.
connected.
Yeah. So it's a lot of, start asking better quality questions, and you'll have a better quality life. I'm not going to get into all the deep aspects of it. Do your own research, come up to your own conclusions. But for me, it's like, okay, well, if the why is to have a good life, to have a good life is to live. And that's not associated with education. That's not associated with working. It can be, but it's not necessary. So for each individual, it's how can I live my best life? And
Hmm.
that's a really great question to start getting clear on.
Well, you made me think about this aspect of this topic of mastery. And again, a program that we've been fed is if you go to really good schools, then you can become a master of X. And, we could say you'll become a master of whatever you major in. And what's kind of interesting in school is that you're really forced to learn a diversity of things, which obviously can have its benefits. But when you get into masters talking about mastery, they essentially talk about, and maybe you know the exact phrase, but if you're spread too thin, you're really a master of nothing, or you can put your focus into something that really lights you up, inspires you, and you can become a master by really honing in on that specific thing.
I'm going to agree and disagree.
Okay.
Just the way people might interpret that is that
Hmm.
to only focus on one thing allows you to become a master, which isn't true. That's like us. That's what we that's what we initially thought.
Hmm.
We wanted to help people become healthier, live better lives, and we became chiropractors for that reason. And then we saw that chiropractic was great, but it had limitations.
Hmm.
And we kept asking better quality questions, learned different aspects from psychology, energetics, etc. But the master is actually the one that has that focused attention on one thing, but then learns how to connect everything to that one thing. And that's why I think like homeschooling and these quote unquote newer age schooling systems, that's what they're doing. It's like they're figuring out what lights a child up, and then they're connecting. How can we teach mathematics to this? How can we teach science to this? How can we teach how nature works to this? How can we teach how sports are aligned to this? And that's how somebody becomes a master because they're maximizing their zone of genius.
Well, I think you just nailed it, because kind of the point that I was wanted to make is that what happened for us and many others is you go to school, you go through the conventional training, and then we got out, and that's actually when our most inspired and most revolutionary learning happened, because we were honing in and becoming masters of what we needed to learn in order to best help people in the profession and the vocation that we were in. But part of that, it wasn't just about reading and listening. It was experience driven as well. And one of the things that Julius Caesar said is experience is the best teacher. And unfortunately, what type of experiences are happening in school settings nowadays? Oh, a class trip once a year. And so that's what happens with a lot of homeschooling or these other unconventional models, is that yes, they're doing, some reading, and they're taking in information from that perspective or from auditory perspective, but it's a lot of hands-on kinesthetic as well as experience driven, which is a huge factor in really becoming a master. And exactly what you said is, like, if someone can drive with the thing that gets them really excited, like they have the freedom to say, I get really excited about mechanics of cars, and essentially that's going to be engineering. And then they're able to connect all these other topics and subjects back to the thing that they're most passionate about. That's when they have more of diversity in their learning and understanding. But it's like when you're siloing out all the subjects, and it's like, I kind of understand this, I kind of understand this, I kind of understand this. It's like nobody knows how to use it. It becomes essentially worthless information.
Yeah, and I think not to like Dieter, but it's also people don't have a good, strong foundation with the future. They keep they just they're in line and they just do what everybody else does. And now more than ever, it's like I said, we're transitioning now this industrial age and into the information age. And that information age is changing how everybody's going to be living, how everybody's going to be working. And I'll get deep on that in another podcast. But school, you have to figure out what's going to be most important to you, how you want to live your life. And you could say, oh, you don't know that when you're at a young age, but I just call bullshit. You haven't had enough experiences at a young age based on how you lived your life at a young age. There's no experiences if all you do is sit in a desk most of your day. So you don't know how you want to live because there's no experiences, which is why people don't really start to know themselves till they're later. But you have these people that studied 2 hours a day, and then the rest of the day at a young age, they're learning themselves. They're
Mm-hmm.
learning to break rules. They're learning to push boundaries. They're doing these things. They're getting feedback mechanisms. They may be getting in trouble, which is all part of figuring out who you are, what's important to yourself. And then from that, going back to this gentleman, he could have not went to school, college when he was 15, or he could have done something else. And it's just, you have to figure out what's actually in alignment with you. Is it school? And is it school? Like for us, we had to do that to be able to practice chiropractic. Yeah, okay, that's an alignment. Somebody else's, I don't really want to be school, but for what I want to do, I need to grow this network. So it's going to be really important for me to go to an Ivy League so I can rub shoulders, arms, whatever, elbows, hopefully not other body parts, maybe whatever you're into. Let's get weird. And create that network so that that's going to allow you to create whatever you want to create. And then other people, it's like, no, it's like I'm going to code or I'm going to get into building robotics, whatever it is. You just I'm going to fish, it's whatever lights you up.
But I want to speak to what you just said about because I said it as well when when it comes to going to these prestigious schools, part of it is the networking that you do. And
All of it's the networking, let's be
well,
honest.
yes, but I want to get really clear on a specific point here because when it comes to what's going to allow you to have a great life and also attain some level of success in whatever version that is for you, if that's money, if that's connection, if that is freedom, whatever that is. Really, the concept is being able to do whatever you want to do when you want to do it with whomever you want to do it. And connection and people are a part of that. But this isn't necessarily just about who you know and what connections that you have. This is about gaining a level of people skills that allows you to understand people, that allows you to connect with people, that allows you to create relationships that can serve you and your values. And I think that we have so much focus in our educational systems about intellect. How many kids are putting, or one, they have their parents putting pressure on them, teachers putting pressure on them, and then they're putting pressure on themselves about being a good test taker. And how many people in our experience now that you've seen that were brilliant in school, this was undergrad, doctorate school, and they were so smart, valedictorian, etc. And then they get out and they're struggling in their business, especially chiropractors. You could be so smart and you can understand the nervous system inside and out, but at the end of the day, you deal with people. If you don't know how to communicate with people, you don't know how to connect with people, you don't know how to nurture people, then you're not going to be successful and your job isn't going to feel that fulfilling. That's a level of mastery. And it's not just about intellect. And there's so much happening in school systems that are actually ripping that away from us more than, well, not giving it to us, but even depleting the skills that we have. Don't do this, don't say that. And taking away our intuition and our intuitive way of connecting with others. And so I think this is a really, really important thing for people to understand is that you most and I know you're going to probably say something about like AI's taking over and whatever. And yeah, whatever, that's fine. But if you want to be a human and have an enriched life, Community is part of that. Having friends, having a relationship, a romantic relationship, having kids that actually like you. Like, no matter what, there is human interaction that is part of an enriched life experience.
Yes, 100%.
He's like, I'm not going to go to AI yet.
Maybe watch out for our next podcast. It will probably be on AI. Um, yeah, 100%. And I think, as just speaking to parents out there, when I talked about having that clarity on the future, on the vision, it's figuring out and allowing the kid to have the experiences so that they can figure out who they are. Because a lot of adults haven't even done that. We've been forced into the system of grind for so long, and that we have these struggles, and it's because you don't know who the fuck you are. And there's no stability in that. And then everything's chaos around there. Of course it is. It has to be. It's the feedback mechanism. So, yeah, we can work on ourselves, but we also have to give a different opportunity for our kids because they're the next generation coming up. And if we just do things the same way, it's going to shit in, shit out. We have to change the system, the process, if we want a better quality of life where we're at right now. And that's the goal.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking about, because you always talk about how, you know, the energy is always in balance. And when you think about our
That's why I was a shitty
parents,
student, so I could be a great doctor.
what did you always say? C is for chiropractic.
Yep.
But it is
And sometimes D is for degree.
but really at the end of the day, the some of the best and most successful chiropractors that we know, and when I say successful, yes, a certain level of success in the wealth, but success in the legacy that they're leaving in the profession. They were not the best students because it wasn't just about that. There was so much more that made you a good practitioner. But the point that I want to make is we're millennials. We're like old millennials. And then most of our parents are boomers. And I think that they're the older millennials, at least. There's definitely some overlap with that hustle and work hard, go to school, get the job. We didn't take even a minute off after school. We dove right into working, and then we went from 1 year of working for someone else into entrepreneurship. And that was pretty normal for our age group, which is, 40s. And then our parents, a lot of them, the 9 to 5 jobs, that industrial age that you were talking about. And now there's so much judgment on the Gen Zers who are like, I'm going to have a YouTube channel and I'm never going to leave my house and I'm going to make multi-millions. And that is a reality for a lot of them. And it was very comical because when we had our brick and mortar business and we had a lot of employees, we had all different age groups. And, the mentality of a Gen Zer at times was kind of funny. But at the same time, I always tried to zoom out and, you know, I came from that work so hard and blood, sweat, and tears and hustle and just do that because that's in your character. Not necessarily because one day it's going to make you super rich. It doesn't actually make you rich. It's just like just do that because that's the right thing to do and that's the way it should be. And that was very much instilled from my immigrant parents as well. And and then the Gen Zers, what was the best one we heard? My schedule doesn't match my circadian rhythms. Like
That
you'd hear
was
this shit and it was
that
just
was a good
like,
one.
that was fantastic. But the thing that I want to say about the Gen Zers is that they watched us. They watched the millennials. They watched the boomers. They watched as they hustled and worked hard and were still not happy. They were still,
And we're
not
still not
necessarily
ahead, most people.
still not ahead. And they essentially, consciously or unconsciously, were like, fuck that. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to work a 9 to 5. I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to never have vacation time. I don't want any of that.
But the
And
bad part
so
about this is that it's it's like you said, I always talk about the balance.
it's like,
It's going from one extreme to the other
yes.
extreme. And, you know, hopefully there's young people listening to this. I think the majority of people who listen to us is a little older than that. But they need
So
guidance.
share it. Share it with your Gen Zer.
They need guidance because yeah, it you can definitely set your life up with working 2 hours a day, and that's all you need to do. If all you need to do is go to school 2 hours a day to be that productive, all you really need to do is work 2 hours a day to live the same quality of life. If you want to have a higher quality of life, do that to 4 hours, 6 hours. You can work as much as you want if that's in alignment to what you want to build. But most people going back is they just want to live a good life. They're not trying to overly conquer everything. That's the fantasy that we see on social media, but that's not the reality for most people.
But I think that a key factor that is really one of the drivers of why we want to do this podcast in the first place is some of these Gen Zers, like one, if you're judging them, take a step back and see what you can learn from them. Because one thing that stands out to me specifically is most of them are becoming some type of entrepreneur very early because there is accessibility when it comes to social media, making money on TikTok, making money on YouTube. But
I just thought
th
of get ready in the morning with Dr. Nick.
oh gosh, I am the worst. Get ready with me. But like one of our social media people wanted me to do that, and I was like, one, I'm very awkward in that setting, and number two, I don't even know how to do my makeup. So like it's gonna be 2 minutes of like, here's my blush and here's my mascara. What do we got? What are we talking about in 2 minutes? Anyway, total derail.
Sorry.
But the point that I'm making is that they're starting these, entrepreneurial endeavors young. And so they still are retaining their creativity. They're retaining kind of the I don't give a fuck what I put out there. I'm just going to be me because they haven't been beaten down with bad reviews and crazy trolls on social media. They're just kind of like, I'm young, I'm free spirited, I'm still creative. I could be a little bit of an entertainer, I'm innovative, and they're just taking that and they're leveraging it. And then some of them are blowing up. And then they're like, I don't need to go to college. I don't need to work because I've created this level of success through doing something innovatively and creatively that they like. They enjoy it. If you create a YouTube channel, you're usually doing it to have fun with it. Or you're even recording yourself playing video games, which people watch, which is crazy to me. But anyway, it's like if you love video games and then you're recording yourself watching a video game, there's other people that are going to watch. Like they're doing it based off of what we talked about in the last podcast is they're making a decision to do this based off of inspiration and not desperation. That's a totally different dynamic. If you're doing something out of inspiration and also bringing a level of creativity, uniqueness and innovation, you're going to blow up. And I think that's what in our experience, and I think you have had your own experience with it, but it's as we have embarked on, our journey of entrepreneurship to our own personal growth, and we've been forever learners, and we've hired mentors, and we've worked with Dr. Martini, and we've worked with Joe Dispenza. We've worked with all of these different people that would be classified as masters of their trade. And essentially the theme was I had to unlearn so much and then learn more and reclaim my critical thinking, reclaim my common sense to become a master. And so what we're trying to say here today, because we are parents, you can see I'm wearing black, you can't really tell, one on the way. And you know what what our experience was the same is we had to unlearn to then learn. And it was also a bit of an emotional mindfuck journey to regain common sense, critical thinking, innovative thinking. And, we look at that as we don't want our kids to go through that. We want
So go
them
ahead.
to be able to 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 maintain that, still gain intellect, but also bring uniqueness, innovation, creativity to everything they do.
So saying we're going to wrap this up so we can talk about AI next.
So excited.
But before you do anything, ask questions. The quality of your life is dictated by the quality of the questions you ask. And foundationally, just ask why. Why why do people go to school? Why is this going to lead to a better life? Is there a better way? If I knew a better way, what would it look like? If I tried this, what would be some pros and what would be some cons? You know, Start studying other people. Like look at look at life through a different lens. And when we talk about unlearning, the the biggest thing about unlearning is a transfer of focus and a transfer of attention, a transfer of energy. And when you can start asking questions that are going to transfer your attention and focus onto something else, and then we can put more attention there and start asking questions along that highway, well, guess what? We start unlearning this because it starts dying. It doesn't have the focus, it doesn't have the attention, it's not given the energy anymore, the fuel it needs to survive. So it's like if we want to kill something, we don't need to protest that it's a bad thing, that it was evil, blah, blah, blah. It had its necessary means, and it's our job to move on.
Mhm.
I worked with a gentleman the other day, and he was, you know, upset about Hollywood and all the things that are coming out and pedophilia and this and that. And I'm like, if we fight it, guess what? We're putting energy into it. It served its purpose. There were pros and cons to Hollywood and everything else. And we dove deep into it and he realized afterwards that for him, if he wants to be a part of a change, the first thing he needs to change is him. And when he changes, just like parents and kids, it's the parents that need to change to be able to give that change to their kids. So he needed to change and stop giving attention, stop fighting something, because anytime that you fight, you've already lost.
Yeah.
So the only time to win something is actually just to move on, to not give it attention, to let it die, and to fuel something else. And the
Yeah.
goal is to fuel something that's actually going to serve you, to be inspiring. Fighting something isn't
The same
inspiring.
amount of energy. If anything, it's more energy to fight it. And I think that's really important what you said is you're going to spend the energy no matter what. You might as well spend the energy on what you actually want to create opposed to fighting the thing that you don't like. Boom. Okay, one last point that I want to make because I feel like the elephant in the room is always if the myth um that needs to be busted. And when we're talking about this concept, some of you are probably really inspired right now, but will not take action on this. And you might have kids that are in school and you're just like, oh, all of these points are so relevant. But and you go to the scarcity mindset, and especially the scarcity mindset is driven by the things that people are going to say to you. Well, what it you can't take your kid out of school because then they're going to be weird and they're not going to have any friends and they're not going to be socialized. And what if they're not in sports? And and then the list goes on. And really at the end of the day, it goes back to the idea of tunnel vision that Dr. Nick talked about in our other podcast is what about all the things that you can't see? What about all of the other opportunities for your kid or kids to potentially build a network of people that are more aligned with them, more aligned with their values, more aligned with the things that they like to do, opposed to the kids that they're stuck with in their traditional school system. So it's not black and white that if your kid is homeschooled, they're, going to be isolated and alone and they're going to be an introvert and a weirdo. That is just a lie that a lot of us have been told, because there is so much more opportunity for them to be involved in experiential things that can allow them to build networks and friendships and connections with other people from other places, from other walks of life. So don't when you get inspired by something, if it's this podcast or anything, it is natural for us to go into that fear or that scarcity mindset,
The fear and the
but bring
scarcity
yourself out of it.
is the focus on the door closing because we're not
Yes.
aware of the doors that are opening. And that's
Yes.
why I love the tools like meditation and different things that can quiet down and stop that left brain critical attachment and allow us to connect with our right brain, which has awareness that we're not always conscious of.
100%. Love that. All right, guys. See you on the next one where we talk about AI. I'm already nervous.